So we're looking at the extract on page 58, and the question is, why did Stalin modernize using the 5-year plans? There's quite a few reasons in here. I'm just going to focus on the first one. And then in the first couple of paragraphs, we are looking at the question of whether it was the need to prepare for war. Was the policy necessitated and justified by a far-sighted vision of the need to defeat Hitler? And he says, this achievement was the essence of 1946 claims. So Stalin was claiming in 1946 that that's why industrialization was needed. But is that true? The author asks himself, because it would look superficially as if that was true, but is it really true? And so in this second paragraph, I find him saying, preparation for war was a much more important consideration in motivating Stalinist industrialization than it was for some other industrializing countries. So he says it's pretty important, especially compared with other countries that were also going through industrialization. And he says this need to prepare for war came partly from communist mistrust of the outside world. But it also came from the existence of real enemies. So they were really there, but it's also partly the communist mistrust of the outside world. And now this mistrust, in turn, had roots both in the Russian tradition, so there's a Russian tradition going on here, and in communist perception of the outside world. Okay, so the Russian tradition, communist perception of the outside world, they both fed into mistrust, and mistrust itself led to the feeling that the USSR needed to prepare for war, which led in turn to industrialization. So this Russian tradition, I'll change that color just so that we can see it a bit more clearly. Russian tradition went back at least as far as Peter the Great. Communist perception of the outside world, communists for their part talked about the capitalist encirclement, an ideology of capitalist encirclement. So that's where that fear from the communists came from, but also from the real memories of invasion by European powers and from Japan in World War I and in the Russian Civil War. So he has put together a series of claims there to make the connection between Russian history, the Russian Civil War, communist attitudes, and the need to prepare for war and therefore industrialization. Let's have a look at what this looks like then. So if here's industrialization and the 5-year plans over here, we've got a poster from 1929 saying something like build gigantic factories, 5-year plan stuff. He's saying that, well, that's motivated by the need to prepare for war. Here's a picture of a poster of Stalin, I think from about 1932, 1933, making the clear connection between all these tanks and the aeroplanes and Stalin and the 5-year plans. And he says that this feeling that the USSR needed to prepare for war actually has a long history, going back all the way to Peter the Great. Here he is dressed up in his armor. And Russians had always felt like they needed to prepare for war and to use the power of the state to prepare for war. But he also says that actually comes from communist fears. And some of these communist fears come from a fear of invasion dating back to World War I. Here's the Kaiser in a Russian propaganda poster from the First World War, but also from the interventions during the Russian Civil War. So here you've got Uncle Sam and a capitalist figure from Britain, and on the leash are 3 dogs, and these are the names of 3 white generals. So communist fears of invasion, dating back partly to World War I, partly to the Russian Civil War, fed into this feeling that USSR needed to prepare for war. And that was exacerbated in 1927 by this war scare. So why did Stalin modernize using the 5-year plans? Well, partly because of the need to prepare for war. And that need to prepare for war comes from these roots. So you can see there, hopefully, how this claim is put together by this historian. Read on through the rest of the extract, see if you can do the same thing, see if you can map out how the historian puts the claims together to justify the argument about why Stalin chose to modernize, and why, when he chose to modernize, did he opt for the 5-year plans method rather than, for example, the NEP method. Hope that helps.